It's time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
On a Wednesday, and great to have you with us. Sammy Arnell with the day off. So it's me riding solo. Well, kind of. I got a little help from my friends. Former Major League Baseball reliever David Aardsma will drop by. We'll talk about awards season with him. Also want to get his thoughts on the recent released Hall of Fame ballot for 2025. So we'll get into some baseball. A little fun November hot stove talk. It's cold out here in Las Vegas. I didn't know it could get this cold in Las Vegas, where we emanate from. We will be joined by Dennis Bernstein. Speaking of cold, it's always cold inside those hockey rinks and arenas around America and around Canada, where you can watch us, by the way, now. Hello to our Canadian audience. We'll talk with Dennis Bernstein of thefourthperiod.com, SiriusXM NHL Radio, get his thoughts on the NHL season and some of the top stories there. Kurt Helin, in his usual Wednesday spot, will join us as well. But we start things out in the NFL with news that broke after we got off the air. And after we finished putting the show to bed on Tuesday. This inevitably happens once a week with this show. It's just a little peek behind the curtain. It's one of the things, honestly, that frustrates me most about doing this sort of show and the way it's formatted, is that news can sometimes break right after we send the show out to affiliates for them to air throughout their different broadcast days. So I always lament the fact that sometimes we are this syndicated show, and I love our audience, and I love the stations we're on, and we will continue to do this until the wheels fall off, as they say. But it always drives me nuts that once a week there will be this story. Like last week, it was Greg Popovich having suffered a mild stroke, and that news breaking. Just every day, it seems to, or I should say once a week, it seems to happen when we do this show. But Joe Douglas was relieved of his duties as general manager of the Jets and look, they may have just been doing the guy a favor, because it feels like everything this organization touches at this point isn't very good. And you can look back at his tenure and are there disappointments and are there successes, some draft picks they hit on, some they obviously missed on. But Joe Douglas is just the latest casualty in a era of incompetence that has been overseen by Woody Johnson, who we'll get to in a second. But again, as they sort of pick at the pieces, and sort of, Woody Johnson is this vulture picking at the carcass of a dead Jets season. As we watch this happen and this downward spiral, and as somebody pointed out over the weekend, right now, you could go have dinner at a Five Guys, and it's more expensive than a Jets ticket on the secondhand market. Like, people are giving them away, basically. People are wearing bags over their heads. That's the sort of season it's been for the Jets in this year that had so much promise. And the one common denominator that still remains is Aaron Rodgers. And nobody quite knows where all of this is headed as far as the Jets as an organization, who have been, again, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, disappointment in the NFL. And with a lot of teams that have been disappointments, you can point to injuries. You can point to, in some cases, catastrophic injuries. Last year, the Jets had theirs with Aaron Rodgers. And that's why a lot of people were willing to give a pass to the organization for whatever happened last year. And it was a mess at the quarterback position, obviously, with Zach Wilson, who's now found greener pastures in Denver with the Broncos. I think he's with Denver with the Broncos. But anyway, you look at this organization right now, and I think it's time to have a conversation about Woody Johnson and his tenure as owner of this team, which goes 24 years, almost ending season 25. The Jets are 171 and 227 under Woody Johnson's ownership. Just a tick under 43%. I mean, that is failure as an owner. We talk about common denominator right now being Aaron Rodgers here in these last 2 years. But if you think of the last 24, That man. It's that guy. Woody Johnson has been the common denominator in a generation of disappointment. All Jets fans have known primarily, a couple of years with Rex Ryan notwithstanding, is disappointment when it comes to this organization. And it brings to mind that football is the one sport, and this always blows my mind, but football is the one sport, and owning a major league team is the one thing where you could do the worst job imaginable and still up your net worth dramatically, even if you didn't own other stuff like Woody Johnson does. Even if we just said you're the owner of the Jets, and that's all you had. Woody Johnson bought this franchise 24 years ago for $635 million. According to CNBC, in the year 2024, it's now worth over $7 billion. Let that sink in for a second. Marinate in that. Imagine sucking so much at your job as the owner of an organization, as the leader of an organization. Imagine sucking so much at your job the way Woody Johnson does and still have something increase in value tenfold, 10 times what he bought it for, more than 10 times. In virtually no other business can you do this. Own a restaurant. Somebody comes in, finds a hair in the food. They're not coming back. Own a coffee shop. The milk curdles. Coffee's ruined. That customer's never coming back. Ice cream parlor. Insurance outfit. Widget maker. If you suck at what you do, you generally aren't rewarded. But Woody Johnson and the Jets have. Amazing. And one last thing before we get into some NBA with Kurt Helin. Some guys get to end and walk out on top. Jerome Bettis, John Elway, Peyton Manning. Some guys just get to walk away from the game on top, or as close to the top as they can be. Doesn't happen often, but it does happen. Aaron Rodgers is the antithesis of that. He's going to limp away from this game with his legacy in tatters. Kurt Helin joins us next. Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of the show. Let's do some basketball. Dennis Bernstein will join us in 10 minutes. We will sandwich him in with some basketball talk with Kurt Helin of Pro Basketball Talk at NBCSports.com, who hangs out with us on the show. Well, they're not going to go 82-0, Kurt. Let the disappointment sink in. Let it wash over you. The Cavaliers beaten in Boston by the Celtics last night. Hell of an effort to get back in this game in the second half, but Boston just a little too much.
Yeah, I don't believe in moral victories. I'm sure Kenny Atkinson would be happy to tell you about how he doesn't believe in moral victories. Jason, it was kind of a moral victory. Like, they hung with the champs, right? Like, and they took the best punch. All those made three-pointers, 63% three-point shooting in the first half from Boston. And they came back. They came back with what's really been the difference this year, and you and I have talked about it. It's Evan Mobley. Evan Mobley stepping up on offense and taking charge transforms this team. They get back into it, and they can look at this as, hey, we hung with the champions playing well on their home court, and we did it without Isaac Okoro and a couple other, Karis LeVert wasn't there, some of their quality bench players, but Okoro, and then I know they talked about it on the broadcast, they missed his defense. They really missed somebody they could throw on Jaylen Brown or Jason Tatum and have a chance. So they've got to feel pretty good about this. Like, hey, we can stand there and go toe-to-toe with these guys.
If there is something missing through whatever it is, the first 20 games or 15, 16 games, if there is something you see as missing that they're going to have to go out and address at the deadline, what is it?
Probably shooting, and everybody needs more of it, and depth. There are smarter people than I in the basketball world who aren't convinced that their roster construction is going to hold up when push comes to shove. But I think Kenny Atkinson's got him in a better spot and is doing more with it. That said, the depth is going to matter because Boston's going to roll out 8 quality guys come the playoffs, right? You're just, they're going to be good. They're going to be deep, and you've got to be able to match that. And I'm not sure how much do you trust Karis LeVert? How much do you trust Isaac Okoro, who struggled with his shot and stuff? They're going to have to find a little more shooting. But we're talking about second round of the playoffs and beyond problems, which are the kind of problems everybody wants to have.
It's very true. Another week has passed, and it's another week where the 76ers are just hot garbage.
Yeah.
Is there any end in sight for this to you? Like, are they digging, or when is it too late? Like, when does it become, untenable, this idea of them, well, eventually it's going to turn around. At what point does that happen?
Yeah, I'm not sure when it happens. And the bigger problem is they have dug themselves a hole. The advantage they're in is that it's the East. So I believe they're still just like 4 games out of the number 6 seed still because it's the East. And so you can start doing 11 and still like be within striking distance. But they've just made their path so much, even if they turn it around tomorrow, they've just made their path through the playoffs so much more difficult. Now they're going to be on the road. They're going to have to do all this stuff that they didn't think they were going to have to do. There's still a sense of we need to get all 3 of our stars on the court together, and this will make sense. That sounds great, but part of the reason for bringing in Paul George was that you were going to have 3 stars, so when Joel Embiid was inevitably out or Paul George was inevitably out, you were going to be able to keep winning. You were going to be able to keep playing. There's not good depth on this team. They clearly don't buy into the coaching, even though Nick Nurse and yeah. Doc Rivers might be another issue. Nick Nurse and Daryl Morey jobs are safe right now. They're not buying in. They're not selling out. And look, if you're having a team meeting 13 games into the season, I mean, that in and of itself says an hour-long post-game team meeting with guys calling each other out. That shows you how big the problem is.
Does there come a point where they have to, if they get dug into too big a hole, is there a point where they have to revisit the decision on Embiid not playing back-to-backs just because they're going to need the win so bad to get into the postseason?
That might come because their problem is they don't really have an option to dig out any other way. There's not, hey, let's just make another move. They're not really poised to make another big move. They've married themselves to this big 3 and trying to fit the right pieces around them, and anything they do will be at the real fringes right now. So there could very well come a point where everybody's got to play every game or close to it, as close as we can get, so that we can get into I guess they came out of the play-in last year as the 7th seed, but then they got, they lost to the Knicks in the first round. Does it not feel like that scenario is coming back, Jason? Does it not feel like play-in, first-round exit again?
Yeah, no, it definitely does. Before I get to the West in the next segment, give me a thought on, or in a couple of segments after we talk to Dennis Bernstein, but give me a thought on this LaMelo Ball thing where he gets fined $100,000 by the league, the anti-gay slur that he used after the game. I know that, the staff and the organization has talked to him. Give me a sense for, I guess, the level of disappointment within that organization that they've had to go through this sort of distraction with him for these comments that he made in a post-game interview.
Yeah, it is a disappointment. It is a distraction, and it is an issue the Hornets would like to move past. Remember, this is the city and team that lost the All-Star game a few years back for a couple of years because of the bathroom bill. This is an issue that they would like to move past, even in a red state.
Is it surprising? Is it surprising though, from a maturity state? Because it felt like LaMelo Ball had kind of turned the corner a bit. I felt like it took me by surprise. A
little bit, yeah. I think that. How should I say this? I don't want to dismiss what he said as wrong and something he needed to be talked to about. But I think for him and a certain generation of players, how the phrasing he used is almost instinctual. Like they kind of just grew up saying it when they were 12 and they never stopped. And that's not okay. But I don't know that it was malicious on his part intentionally as much as just this thing he's got to learn isn't okay. And that's the maturity issue.
Yeah. I got 30 seconds left in this segment. Milwaukee still stinks.
They're thinking less because they're playing bad teams, but having to go to overtime to beat them. But yeah, look, they're not good. They're simply just not that good and good enough. And even
sounds
when they get
crazy to say,
they're just not. They're going to play with Boston and Cleveland. Did you see that game? Milwaukee's not near that level right now.
I still can't wrap my head around it, given where this team was when they fired Adrian Griffin. I still can't get my head around it. That team, a lot of that same team, and I can't. I can't. Yeah. Let's do some Western Conference. We'll come back with our friend Kurt Helin of Pro Basketball Talk in a bit. We proceed on this Wednesday edition of the show. We'll have more with Kurt Helin on the NBA coming up in about 10 minutes. Do some hockey with this guy, the great Dennis Bernstein of thefourthperiod.com, Sirius XM NHL radio as well. All right, well, look, from day one of even before the season started with you and I, we were like, all right, what happens if the Bruins kind of struggle out of the gates? Well, we find out. Jim Montgomery's out of a job.
Yeah. And I know people are pointing at his record overall. I think with the Bruins, he's .715 win percentage, which is off the charts primarily because of that incredible season they had 2 seasons ago. But when you look at this team, not only the numbers bear it out, but when you watch this team, and I've watched them over the last couple of games, Jason, they're not a well-coached team. Right? They're the 5th worst. This is the Bruins, who always win with defense. 5th worst defensive team in the league right now, and the worst power play in the league. Worse than Utah or San Jose or Anaheim, the worst. So it's not good. And so you're not playing well on the ice. You've gone at your captain in front of the cameras a couple of times on the bench. You benched Pasternak for a game. Then when Swayman's not playing well, you say, well, is spring training a thing? I mean, is training camp a thing? And he goes, yeah, and that's what training camp's for. So he's probably called out some players. And there's a lot of expectations in Boston. Now, I will say this. You can't fire 23 players. And that's probably the main reason, because when you look at this team, Jason, they woefully have underperformed. Of their top 5 scorers, 2 are on their 4th line. So the big guys like Charlie Coyle, Elias Lindholm, to a lesser extent, Brad Marchand, they haven't delivered for the coach. And when that happens, the coach is the first target. And Don Sweeney thought it was necessary to get rid of Montgomery, but he's fired 2 other coaches. Last 2 fired coaches, and Don Sweeney, both won the Jack Adams. So he's fired 3 consecutive coaches who have won a Jack Adams award. So there's a lot of expectations in Boston, a lot of pressure, and the result was Jim Montgomery's no longer there.
Is there enough evidence to tell you one way or another historically what in-season coaching changes mean in the NHL versus other sports?
No, there are instances where coaches have been fired, like when Robbie Ftork was fired in New Jersey a couple of weeks before the season ended by Lou Lamoriello in New Jersey, and they were in first place. And Larry Robinson wound up taking them to win a cup, right? So there are instances of Craig Berube coming in St. Louis in 2019 as an interim coach and leading that team to a title when they were in last place overall in the standing. So there are instances. Now, the good news is, the Islanders won a shootout last night, so technically the Bruins are out of a playoff spot. They're 9th right now, but it's not like they're 10 points behind in some really powerful division. So they have the opportunity, if they can get back on track under Joe Sacco, play well and make the playoffs. But the way this team is playing right now, Jason, there's a lot of work for Joe Sacco to do. His top guys aren't producing. The special teams are a mess. The defense isn't what it once was. There's a lot to do. Plus, the main reason this team hasn't won in the past over the last couple of seasons, their center play hasn't been good. And it's the same thing this season. Their center play just isn't strong enough to compete with the more powerful teams in the Eastern Conference, and that's why you see a result of what they are. They're under 500 right now with the quarter of the season gone.
Alex Ovechkin, lower body injury in his age 39 season, playing the way he was. They're calling it week to week. What does that mean to you? I know we have these vague NHL injuries, and when you saw or these designations, and watching the injury and seeing it the way I did, it didn't look good. It obviously didn't look intentional, but it didn't look good. What is your sense right now on the Ovechkin injury?
Well, because the designation is so nebulous, Jason, if we had more betting on the games, I'm sure we'd have more transparency with respect to injury statuses. Here's the thing, and I put this on social media yesterday when they announced it. Week to week is never 1 week. It's probably closer to a month than a week. That's my experience when dealing with injuries and designations. So, which is a tough thing because he would have broke the record at this pace. Now, would he have scored 50-some-odd goals that he was on pace for? No. He needed 42 to start the season. And the way this team is playing, with their upgraded roster, with Spencer Cartwright doing a great job, he would have gotten 42 goals. Now, there's a question, because Jason, you said, and I saw the injury. It wasn't classic knee on knee. To me, it looked like it was a little bit below the knee, which may have saved him a little bit. But the question is, at that age, even though he's a wonder with respect to, his physicality and how great shape he stays in, like how much can he bounce back from a knee injury? Now, his game is not reliant on speed. He's not Connor McDavid, Jason. So that's the one good thing. Can he stand in the left circle and do his one-timer on his off wing and get a goal? He probably can. So maybe he doesn't need to be at 100% to come back for his game to be effective, but it's a blow to him. It's a blow to the chase. Now, he'll break it at some point in time, but the way the start to the season happened for him, we were all expecting that sometime maybe in March or early April that we'd be celebrating him breaking Gretzky's record.
Yeah. 27 points for the Capitals through the first 18 games of the season. And look, week to week, we keep asking the question, is Winnipeg really this good? And so far, there isn't anything to tell us they're not.
Yeah, well, they lost a couple of games, so they were human. They're not going to go 81-1. But when you watch them last night against the Florida Panthers on the power play, like, this is a team that's dangerous. This is a team that easily could get out of the West and win a Stanley Cup right now. Now, the thing is, it's 20 games in, and you can't play at that pace. So will there be injury? And the only thing I could see that really may affect this team in the regular season might be an injury factor, a rash of injuries. Now, when they get to the postseason, I'm going to be assumptive here, even with 60 games left, this is going to be a dangerous team. But will the big boys show up? And more importantly, the one key guy is a guy who didn't perform last year when they lost in 5 games to the Colorado Avalanche, Connor Hellebuyck, the goaltender, who's probably going to win the Vezina as the best goaltender in the league. He's won it before. Can he win in the playoffs? That's the question. His team looks like to have all the parts. And the great thing about this team, Kevin Cheveldayoff, the GM, is being aggressive. He's looking to add to this team. I don't know where he would add to it. Maybe, I don't know, change the uniforms or something like that. It looks like a perfect team right now. But they're going to be aggressive for the trade deadline. They were that last year. They went and get Tyler Toffoli and Sean Monahan. Like I mentioned, they went out going in the first round. This is a very dangerous team. It looks like it has all the parts to be a Stanley Cup contender, have a deep run this spring.
One last one before I let you go. How surprised are you with Minnesota here out of the gate, just behind Winnipeg in that Central?
Very surprised. I'm not surprised that Kirill Kaprizov is in the conversation for the Hart Trophy, because he has been. He's really led this team. But to see at the top of that division with Dallas, with Winnipeg, like to have them up there with this, and granted, some of these teams have underproduced, like Colorado, like Nashville. Right. But it's a little surprising. Like, if they were to win the division, I'd be shocked. I really would. Do I think they're good enough to get to the 3 seed? Maybe, depending on what Colorado and Nashville do for the balance of the season. It's a really good story. The question is, are they good enough in the playoffs? They have enough depth at center. Will their goaltending hit up? So it's a really nice start. It's a great start for them. I'm not sure it's a great team, but we'll find that over the coming weeks.
Well, I got to tell you, I'm out here in Vegas, and fans of the Golden Knights are thrilled with the start that they've gotten off to out here. I'm gonna have to find. I've not gone to a game yet, I have to say.
All right, let's go.
I know. I'll make it. I'll come when you come. How's that? I'll go when you come.
Go get a media credential or something. Just go in and just hang out.
Dennis Bernstein, always appreciate it, my man.
Always a pleasure, JP. Thanks for the time.
All right, let's take it to segment 4 on this Wednesday edition of Sports Wrap. I said we had a Dennis Bernstein sandwich. Kurt Helin is the bread.
As long as I'm not the tomato and lettuce, I'm good. I just don't want to be the mayo.
I don't know where to go with that. Let's talk about the Western Conference a little bit. How about Dalton Knecht, huh? He connected. I know.
Rule number 1 in the NBA draft should be don't pass on the shooter. Like if the guy can shoot the ball, it's a translatable skill that really helps. Now, granted, it helped. Look, the Lakers are on a win streak against bad teams. He just did that against a bad team in Utah, whose coach ripped them after the game for their play. The Jazz head coach went after his own team. Dalton Knecht can play. He can shoot. He's got good size. He's going to develop into a better defender than he is now. And I'll tell you right now, if I'm JJ Redick, I'm giving a bunch of Rui Hachimura's minutes. Rui's a big guy who can defend a little better and is hot and cold. But on the nights Rui isn't quite there, he's an inconsistent player. I'm rolling Dalton into those minutes because that kid is bringing it.
Yeah, he is. And it kind of reminds you, though, going back to draft night, for him to slip as far as he did. And LeBron made a point of this in the postgame saying, who lets an SEC player of the year just slip through their fingers? Like, nobody wanted this guy?
Part of it is this thing that I think is going away now with the league was he's older, right? He didn't play 1 year in college. He played multiple college years. And there's this, he's 21. How much is he going to develop compared to this 19? Like the Lakers a year ago took Jalen Hood-Schifino Young on the bet on his upside. But the new CBA changes that. You have to have production. If you're going to be a good team, you've got to get production from minimum and rookie contract players because of the tax aprons and stuff. And now the guys are going to look at not only Dalton Knecht, but guys who have been in the league a couple of years, and maybe they don't have the upside, but they can come in and give you quality minutes now. And if you're drafting back into the lottery or later, those guys are going to do a lot better now.
Man, and every time I watch LeBron over the years, the one thing I always say, it always felt like outside of Miami where he had Ray Allen there and stuff like that, it always felt like he's never had shooters around him where he can distribute and find guys open and they can't knock down shots. It was so refreshing, at least for one night, to see that change.
It started to look more like the 2020 championship Lakers, right? When they put shooters and defenders around LeBron, and look what happened.
What kind of a mess? And we haven't talked about them at all. And we didn't talk about the Zion Williamson latest, hamstring injury and all this stuff.
Hamstrings.
What kind of a mess is it in New Orleans where it almost feels like at this point, with the Ingram talk and all this stuff, that this thing is just a teardown at this point?
It's not quite there, but
what else are you going to do? Year after year, it's injuries. And
they've changed the training staff and the health staff a couple of times now, and it's not. Is there somebody on Royal Street, going into the voodoo shops and picking out dolls? And I don't know what's going on over there, but this team should be so much better than it is, and we just haven't seen. Herb Jones Trey Murphy just got back. Trey Mann had a dunk last night, by the way. Trey Murphy, all these guys. They'd be a good team if they could just get everybody on the floor together. Honestly, they were my preseason league pass pick because they were going to play small and fast and put up a lot of points and not stop anybody. I thought they were going to be so much fun, and they're already look in the East. We were talking about 2-11 Philly. Hey man, they can get back up to the 6th seed. Not in the West. Their season might be close to done, and they might have to start thinking long term already in New Orleans because they're not going to be able to climb out of this. There's too many good teams in the West to suddenly climb over that they're going to leapfrog into this great position.
What's going on with Kawhi Leonard? Are they ever going to get him back out on the floor?
I expect they will at some point this season, but I will tell you this. They are playing well enough.
Hold on a second. When you just say it that way, because I know he's starting to practice again, I guess. When I hear you say at some point this just sirens go off in my head. It's crazy.
It could be Christmas. That would seem possible. But they're really secretive about it. He doesn't have to talk. They're not talking about it other than, like you said, kind of an update that he's taking a next step and he's moved. They're not saying much right now, which implies it's not anywhere close, or imminently close. And the advantage they have is, like I said, with Norman Powell stepping up, go Bruins. They're playing well enough that they can wait it out, right? If their philosophy might be, if we can hang around 500 or a little better, and then we get Kawhi Leonard back and he's healthy and can be the Kawhi Leonard we saw when looked like an all-NBA player, was an all-NBA player last, but you get that guy back in this and suddenly we're threatening. And I think that's how they see it. They're like, we're getting so much out of the other guys, and James Harden's holding up his end. Zubac has been great in the paint. We just got to wait for him, and then we're going to be a threat when it matters.
I've got 45 seconds. James Harden being second all time on the 3-point list. That kind of snuck up on me.
Yeah. It's volume, right? Like it is. The funny thing is, you look at the guys outside of Curry, who's got like what is it now? Like a 1,503 lead or something over everybody else, like a ridiculous amount more than even Harden. You look at the other guys on that list, and then you look at the guys coming up like Ant and all these guys and how many threes guys are shooting now. How long before that entire top 10 looks different? But
it's true.
And then Harden to his credit, I mean, he's made a lot more threes, but he's got a lot more. He's just taken a lot more threes, and I'd still rather watch Ray Allen's pure shot every day of the week. Sorry, James.
By the way, hats off to Russell Westbrook. 200th career triple-double last night. He's still playing, by the way.
Hey, he's a little bit good night, bad night with him, but he brings an energy, and right now, Denver could use every bit of bench help they can get.
Kurt Helin, Pro Basketball Talk. Thanks, man.
Take care.
Welcome back to this Wednesday edition of the show. Odds and Ends wraps it up in 10 minutes. Let's talk a little baseball. By the way, tomorrow on the show, we got somebody very cool coming on with us. Not David Aarsma, who you see right there. I mean, he's cool. He's cool. He's cool.
You're the guy tomorrow.
But tomorrow, we got Dave Sims, newly minted Yankees play-by-play voice, also FS1 on college basketball, also a nominee for the Fort Frick Award. He's a finalist for that as well. So much to talk about with the new play-by-play voice of the Yankees, Dave Sims. But here's David Aarsma, ladies and gentlemen, former big league reliever. Yes, sir.
And he was a Mariners, obviously, voice for the Mariners for years. And I think, I might be wrong, ask him, I think he gave me the DA nickname.
Did he?
Yes, I believe so.
Man, I got to ask him that now. See,
different, though, when you're in the locker, when you're playing and you don't necessarily know who, because they had some great voices, Rick Riz. He was there.
Dave Niehaus.
Niehaus was there for the first year. He was there, and then he unfortunately passed away in the offseason.
He's a legendary voice. Part of the soundtrack growing up for me was when the Mariners beat the Yankees.
Right.
And Niehaus was on the call when
one of the best.
Yeah. All right. I don't want to think about that. I want to talk about some baseball, though. Let's talk about the Hall of Fame. And I was curious to get your thoughts with the guys on the ballot. Is there a belief, with an Ichiro being on the ballot, that you just kind of let him go in on his own and let him have that day by himself? Or are there other guys on the ballot that should go in with him? Because there always seems to be this sort of pomp and circumstance of who's a 100% guy, who's a guy that should go in by himself. Where do you stand on stuff like that?
Well, one, I got to thank Mariano for finally breaking the seal on the 100%, even though there should be about 40 guys that are 100%ers.
Yeah, it's true.
I look at this and don't want to make it about one person. There are multiple people on this ballot, even though this ballot is a little thinner. I guess when you add in some of those question marks about players, it gets really thin on the ballot this year. I want multiple guys to go in. I want this to be about who is there. I don't want it to be about one player. I think that takes away from the pomp and circumstance of the day and the amount of players. And when you look at this, Ichiro is as close to 100%er as I've ever seen. Absolutely incredible. But CC is going to be close.
How is that even close? That's the one I was going to ask you about next. CC's a Hall of Famer.
I think he's a Hall of Famer, but I think there's going to be guys that are just sitting there, and some guys are just going to the numbers, and you're just like, okay, 251 wins. Well, there's guys that are not in the Hall of Fame with more wins, and you're like, you're right, great, but there's guys that are better, and there's going to be enough questions where he might not be a first ballot. But to me, I'm sitting there still looking at how is Billy Wagner not in? How is Andrew Jones is on his 8th ballot? This is he was all world. He was a player on every single major league player said, all right, center field, who do you want? Andrew Jones. Put him on my team. I want him on my team. And then when major league players are like, a dude. Like, and there's still Carlos Beltran. Like, there's the question at the end of his career. Like, why did you have to play for the Astros? Just play for somebody else at the very end. That 1 year. Just don't do that one thing, and he's a surefire Hall of Famer.
This is the last year for Wagner, is it not?
Yeah.
He's at 73. He was at 73.8% last year. You need to get to 75%. You got to think he'll get there this year.
The numbers show he's going to go in. The trend, he'll go in. But then you know, and you look at those other guys like A-Rod, Manny, they'll probably never get in, and I personally don't think they should. But those are like A-Rod's arguably one of the top 10 players all time.
See, I put them all in. I put all the steroid guys in. We all know who was what. See, to me, it's the Hall of Fame. It's not the Hall of Good Guys. We still don't ultimately know what role a lot of this stuff played. Pitchers were using it too. I think fans are smart enough to know when they walk into the Hall of Fame what they saw with their own eyes. So to me, I think all of those guys should get in. Clemens should get in. Bond should get in. They should all be in there. But I understand there's a certain segment of the population that disagrees with that.
I'm okay with that. And here's what my argument. I always have I've got a line of the moment testing was implemented. If you did it, you're out. Before then, dude, free for all. Barry Bonds is 100% a Hall of Famer in my eyes. A-Rod not. But I'm okay with the other side of the argument as long as the argument is the Hall of Fame is about the players, the museum is about the story, and let the two be separated. And I'm okay with that. Like, let Pete Rose be in if you're under these circumstances, and then let the museum tell the story of what he did and what the legacy is. I can live with that. But if it's like, hey, no, Hall of Fame is the Hall of Fame, then it's like we got to draw some lines somewhere.
Yeah, I don't disagree. Hey, real quick before I let you go, the Juan Soto chase continues.
Yes.
Where do you think he winds up ultimately?
Miami.
Get the hell out of here.
I think it's the Steve Cohen is making a pretty good run. I think it's gonna be hard though if the Dodgers can make a deal.
No, come on, not the Dodgers.
If they can figure out how to make the money work, that's it. That's the only thing that we're talking about. And we didn't think they could do it with Ohtani, and we didn't think they could do it with Yamamoto, and we're still going down this line. Like, even by having a meeting means they have an argument. They have some way they've figured this thing out, and that is really hard for Juan Soto to not walk away with. At the same time, you have to look at the Yankees and say, man, it's the Yankees and Mets in all reality.
You're hedging.
But if
You're hedging. Stop hedging. Stop hedging. Give me a pick.
Yankees.
Yeah, he's going to wind up with the Yankees. I just don't see the Yankees. I can't see, if it's between the Yankees and Mets, I can't ever see Hal Steinbrenner and this team saying, yeah, we're going to let Steve Cohen outbid us.
There's no chance. No. And maybe they should start pulling the old boss and just let everybody know who's the big dog in New York. Yeah. Stop playing second fiddle and just throw your thing out on the table and just say, man, like, we're the Yankees. Don't ever forget who we are and who our dad was.
David, always appreciate it.
Of course.
All right. Just about time to put the wraps on this baby for a Wednesday. Before we say goodbye, a couple of reminders. If you have not done so yet, go and check out our podcast. SportsWrap with Jason Page podcast is available on all your favorite podcasting platforms. Spotify, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, Odyssey, Amazon, anywhere you get your podcasts. And you can watch us over on Spotify with the video podcast available there as well. Subscribe today. Also, our Substack, which we are gradually building every day. If you have not checked it out yet, the Sports Wrap with Jason Page Substack, go and check that out. We have insider betting picks. We have clips from the show. We have extended conversations and interviews that we put up there that don't make it into the show because sometimes a conversation with a guest might run long, so we have to cut it up for television. Well, you get the full conversation there. Go and check that out as well. Without any further delay, ladies and gentlemen, time for some odds and ends. Odds and ends, the latest college football playoff bracket, poll, whatever you want to call it, has been released. And let the hyperventilating begin. Oregon, Texas, Miami, Boise State get your buys as of right now because they are in a position to win their conferences. That obviously is all subject to change, but it certainly looks like Oregon will remain entrenched in that spot. Boise State jumping in to the quarterfinals and getting that first round bye was certainly a headline. Look at the first round projections though right now. Go and look at the first round matchup projections. There's one that sticks out to me. If I am a Notre Dame fan, I do not want to see Alabama in an opening round game. Given what Alabama has done to them in recent playoff history. If I am the Irish, and I know, look, we have Bill Bender on the show, and he has gone out of his way to say Notre Dame really is playing some of the best football in the country right now. But if I am Notre Dame, I do not want to see Alabama in the opening playoff game. Just don't. But we'll see, obviously, how it all plays out. Georgia, Penn State in the lower half of the bracket if the playoffs were to start today. Ole Miss and Indiana. Now, obviously, a lot of this is subject to change. If Indiana should lose against Ohio State this week, there is a thought that because of the weaknesses in their schedule, they could drop out of this 12-team playoff altogether. And Colorado's still very much in the mix right now when it comes to being able to potentially get into the playoff. You know, when you look at the Week 13 rankings right now, Colorado is 16th. Keep in mind, BYU, by the way, is 14th. They're not even in the top 12, but by virtue of you know, sort of these machinations and the way it all works out, you know, Boise State is a better loss than BYU. You know, still right now, BYU finds its way in, despite the fact that Boise State, or I should say Boise State finds its way in over BYU so far. Boise State has a better loss than BYU on the road against number 1 Oregon. So it's so confusing. They make it so difficult. They really do. You would think there'd be an easier way to figure out how to get 12 teams into this thing that isn't subjective and has all these different formulas, but thus that is where we are. Still a lot of football left to be played over the next couple of weeks and shake this thing out. But Colorado and Deion Sanders still has a shot to get in. Odds and ends, the end for Rafael Nadal, whose career comes to an end. He gave a nice heartfelt speech after wrapping things up at the Davis Cup, and he's had enough time to sort of let this wash over him, to let this all sink in, the fact that he was in the end stages of his career, and he wanted to finish it up with this Davis Cup match, and he was obviously able to do that. But Rafael Nadal, I mean, look, there are very few things living on the West Coast, and even when I lived on the East Coast, where you would get a French Open or an Australian Open final, and it meant having to get up at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning. There are very few things. I mean, there are NFL games on the weekend that start out here in, you know, the European games that they play in the UK and Germany and all this stuff. That'll start at, I don't know, 6 o'clock in the morning out here on the West Coast. I'm not getting up for it. I don't care who's playing. I'm not getting up. When Rafael Nadal stepped on the court in a major or in a Grand Slam, and it was a final, and he was playing a Federer or a Djokovic, or towards the end of his career, maybe an Alcaraz or something like that, I was getting up. I was waking up to watch it because you knew there was a chance you were going to see something that was truly special, or even an Andy Roddick earlier in his career, a Pete Sampras. I mean, you forget how long his career spanned. 20 years for Rafael Nadal. And so much of that spent at the top of his sport, in an individual sport, in a grueling sport, as an undersized guy. And the wear and tear. Rafael Nadal was a one of one. And we wish him well in his retirement. And that is how we'll wrap up this Wednesday edition of the show. We got a special guest on tomorrow's Sports Wrap. Dave Sims newly minted play-by-play voice of the New York Yankees, also does college basketball on FS1, will be on the show. Sam will return as well. Thank you to our guests, David Aardsma, Dennis Bernstein, and Kurt Helin. Thanks to you for watching. I'm Jason Page. We'll see you back here on Thursday for more Sports Wrap.